Hello and welcome to Shabby Merfolk. I'm your Shabby host, Millmaster, and this is a history of magic, one Merfolk at a time. And in a celebration of the relaunch of Shabby Merfolk, we are going to be doing a card-by-card review of every Merfolk that has ever been printed in Magic the Gathering. And I'm going to try to maybe talk a little bit about the lore surrounding the sets that these Merfolk are in, and just some general lore about Merfolk cards and Magic in general. So without further ado, as you can see up here, I have a Merfolk of the Pearl Trident Alpha version. This is the first Merfolk card ever printed. And what I'm going to do when I do the card review, I'm going to show the card, read the flavor text, talk about where it fits in that particular set or in Magic. A lot of these older cards, I will look at how they're costed, what their effects are, compared to what we expect out of cards today, that kind of a thing. So without further ado, we have Merfolk of the Pearl Trident, the one and only Merfolk printed in Alpha and Beta and Unlimited and Revised. There was only Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. That was it. A 1/1 for 1 summon Merfolk. Now the flavor text. Most human scholars believe that Merfolk are the survivors of sunken Atlantis. Humans adapted to the water. Merfolk, however, believe that humans sprang forth from Merfolk who adapted themselves in order to explore their last frontier. So, first and foremost, let's talk about Atlantis. Atlantis is a construct of human history on Earth. It comes from Greek history, and this was a fairly common thing for Magic in the early days, was to use these ideas from our own history and put them into Magic. Now, what they've done is they've sort of gone back in the lore and said, okay, well, where the Merfolk of the Pearl Trident are from, Atlantis, that's a bastardization of a Merfolk word, Atlantish. So we heard that and we said Atlantis, and that's what we call it. So you're going to see a little bit of that over time here. So this is an alpha. I've got a beta right here. And I've got, let's see, that would be the unlimited version. You can see on the unlimited versions right here along the edge, there's a little bit of a bevel in the artwork right by that black line. And when we come to the revised version, you'll see that that's gone. Revised version definitely looks more washed out. Still on the same art. Still on the same flavor text. Still summon Merfolk. That's how creatures were back in the old days. It would say summon and then the type of creature. So this is 4th edition. Still the same thing. Though notice now we got the artist name here. Okay, now we've got a change in art here. This is, let's see. Now this is 5th edition. So this one is 4th edition. This one is 5th edition. Next up we have Portal. This thing is a little weird looking. summon creature. It doesn't even have a type in Portal. But now notice, Portal was a simplification of Magic to sort of introduce it to people that are new. Notice the flavor text now says, are Merfolk humans with fins, or are humans Merfolk with feet? It's the same idea, the same concept that the original flavor text, just in a very simplified form. There was also something called Starter, which is a white bordered version of that same card. They then brought that to, this is 6th edition. Same thing here. 7th edition, we get new artwork. Now notice on these cards, we've shifted away from, and I believe actually on the Starter. So yeah, on Portal, it says summon creature. On Starter, it says creature-merfolk, and that's kind of what we know now is creature with a dash and then what it is. The paladins would be wise not to forget about the Pearl Trident. The Merfolk warriors have turned the tide of more than one human war, and I have no doubt they shall do it again. That's right. And finally, we've got the Merfolk of the Pearl Trident in M13. Same flavor text, but now, of course, we have the new frame. Or it's not the new frame anymore. Now we've got it in an even different frame from this. So that is Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. I really dug deep, and I wanted to get all the versions of this card since it was the first Merfolk that was ever printed. It was the one and only Merfolk for a number of expansions. So let's see. Let's go back to our beta one here. Now, the other card that came out in the original release of Magic was this card. A card anybody that knows Merfolk probably knows and loves. It is the Lord of Atlantis. Summon Lord of Atlantis. Very strange. It says summon, and its creature type is its name. That is kind of weird. A master of tactics, the Lord of Atlantis makes his people bold in battle merely by arriving to lead them. Yeah, but his people were the Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. Those were his people. That was it. So again, back to this idea of Atlantis, of Atlashish or Atlantis. That's the way they say it in Merfolk language. That Atlantis was a colony of an empire on Dominaria. Dominaria was kind of the one and only place we had to set our stories in early Magic. And essentially the Merfolk that lived there were outcasts. They were being oppressed by the empire that they lived in. They lived in an empire called the Vodalian Empire. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. So they're living in this colony they've created. They were artisans, crafters, traders, and they left their home and they went to the north and created the city of Atlantis. So that is really the only lore that we have. Is that they were traders and kind of, they were outcasts. Think of the American colonies. They were sort of religious outcasts that they were still part of England, but they wanted to go into a far-flung country and make their own way due to their oppression. That's what Atlantis is in the Magic world. And yes, if you're wondering why this square border, it's because it's a collector's edition. I do not have a Lord of Atlantis. I am definitely in the market for a PSA 10 Alpha Lord of Atlantis, though. That is something on my wish list for sure. So this is what we had in the Merfolk world. These two cards. We had a Lord of Atlantis who wasn't a Merfolk. He was a Lord. And we had the Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. Now enter the Dark, the next, well, really the second Merfolk that was ever printed. The Merfolk Assassin. He is a Merfolk. He's a 1/2 for 2. You can tap and destroy target creature that has Island Walk. Good to defend yourself against opposing island walking creatures. It also had a little interaction. I don't remember the exact card, but there is a card that taps to give a target creature Island Walk. It's an artifact. Though I believe when the creature that you gave Island Walk, if it dies that turn, you have to bury that artifact. So yeah, Merfolk Assassin. Our second Merfolk in Magic. There's really no lore around this card. There is just the Merfolk Assassin. I think this card might have been printed because maybe people were mad about Island Walk. I really don't know. There wasn't a Merfolk deck out there that was, you had 4 copies of Merfolk of the Pearl Trident, and that's all you could give Island Walk, though there were other Island Walk cards out there. So, now let's talk about the basic lore of early Magic. We're going to talk about Urza and Mishra. It's what's called the Brothers' War. These two brothers were battling each other. They were great artificers, I think is the word. They created artifacts that were used in this great war. Mishra became a Phyrexian, so what happened after that was Urza used something called the Golgothian Silex to unleash something called the Silex Blast, which boiled down to a nuclear blast. It created a huge explosion. He won the war. The brothers were vaporized, though at that point I believe that Urza became a planeswalker, and rather than dying, he planeswalked away later to come back in some expansions. So when that Silex Blast went off, it set off a chain reaction that led, you could think of it as a nuclear winter, and that started to cool the climate of Dominaria, and that had a far-reaching effect. So enter the expansion of Fallen Empires. We're going to the other side of the planet or the plane, and we've got a lot of different groups of people whose empires are falling into ruin because of the cooling climate and the oncoming Ice Age. Eventually, the fallout from the Silex Blast leads to the Ice Age, and that's where we get the set Ice Age, and there's a lot around that. So, the continent we are on is called Sarpedia. We are in the Voda Sea, Voda, which I believe is a Russian word, which means water or sea. So we are in the Voda Sea. We are now talking about the Vodalian Empire. These were the people who oppressed our Mr. Lord of Atlantis and the Merfolk of the Pearl Trident and cast them out or caused them to leave and form Atlantis on the other side of the plane. So the first thing we're going to look at is the basic Vodalian Soldier. He is a 1/2 for 2. Vodalian soldiers had some unique advantages. Often they would ride into battle on war machines rumored to have come from the far northern oceans. Maybe their brothers up in Atlantis made those war machines. Secondary art here. You think you know everything there is to know about battle. You know orc droppings. Underwater combat is three-dimensional. Those thrice damned Vodalians don't attack in ranks, they attack in schools. I don't know who that person that's quoted is there. Okay, we've got another art. This was a common thing in early Magic, is having multiple artworks, which I think is great. I like that idea. So, interestingly, this flavor text right here brings us into the story of the Merfolk in the Fallen Empires. It says, stalwart soldiers, you stand against the Homerids. Now, the Homerids were the main enemy of the Merfolk, of the Vodalian Empire. You stand against the Homerids for Vodalia and for honor. Your homeland cries out for protection, and the moment has come. Now let your valor shine and sound the cry to battle. Victory to Vodalia. And that is Marshal Volnikov. So Marshal Karl Volnikov, it's like a Russian name, because Voda, I believe, is a Russian word, and Vodalia is based on that. So what's happening here is there's massive climate change, there's massive cooling, and ice age is coming. And from the depths of the ocean come these Homerids. And they are attacking the kingdom of Vodalia. They're pushing the Merfolk out there. They're breeding at a massive rate, and the Merfolk don't know what to do, how to fight against them. And finally we have this guy, very human looking, this one. The cooling climate introduced a new threat to Vodalia, the Homerids. Once a minor nuisance, they thrived in the changing environment. Their ceaseless attacks strained Vodalia's defenses to their limit, eventually overwhelming the Empire. So exactly what I had just said. These Homerids attacked, and the Merfolk battled back at first, but they lost. What eventually happened was that the ruler of the Vodalian Empire was someone called Empress Galena the Third, and she said, "Hey, I need a mage to open a portal to help us escape." They knew that up in the north there was Atlantis, or Atlantis, and they were going to open a portal and allow as many Merfolk, basically most of their surviving Merfolk would go in, and they would be teleported to the other side of the plane where that colony was not being threatened by the Homerids. Okay, so that was the soldiers. Let's move on here to the knight. This is the Vodalian Knight. It's a 2/2 for 3. It's got first strike. It's got flying until end of turn if you pay a blue. It cannot attack unless your opponent controls at least one island, and you must bury it if you control no islands. Fear the knight leaping from the water into the air, weapon ready. So it's riding on this sort of winged, I guess it's not really winged, but somehow it's on a mount, and it can fly out of the water. It's kind of funny, to see this Merfolk. It's sort of riding side saddle with its, thing draped over here. It's fin. Now, this was a common theme amongst blue cards, was the idea that if you had an aquatic card and you controlled an island, it was okay. That creature needed water to swim in, so you needed to have lands that were essentially water. Now, this was a real early idea in Magic, that the lands that you were putting into play, were the battlefield for where these creatures were battling. So if you want to field aquatic creatures, you need water for them to be in. Hence, you need islands. If they want to swim over and attack your opponent needs to have an island as well to allow that attack to happen. Okay, next up we have a super classic card, a Sea Singer. I love that picture too. It's like the birth of Venus or something. So, again, same concept, right? Bury Sea Singer if you control no islands. Oh, let's get that into focus here. Bury Sea Singer if you have no islands, and you can tap it to gain control of a target creature if its controller controls at least one island. And you lose control of the target creature if Sea Singer leaves play, or it becomes untapped. You can choose not to untap it, etc., etc. 3 mana for an 0/1. Doesn't seem that great, but this effect really was good. It really was. You could grab any of your opponent's creatures if they had an island, which they often did, or you could play, phantasmal terrain or something that would, turn their stuff into an island. Definitely a good card. It definitely saw play. I remember playing this card and having this card played against me back in the day. Okay, next up is the Svelunite Priest. It's a 1/1 for 2, and you can pay 2 blue and tap it to make a creature not be able to be targeted, essentially what we call Shroud nowadays. But you can only use it during your upkeep. Early Vodalians worshipped Svelun, goddess of the Pearl Moon. Later she became a more abstract figure. Okay. This would be an okay ability nowadays, I think. You would probably want to make it like a 2/2 for 2 and maybe just tap to give that effect, and definitely not just in the upkeep. You can just tap it to give anything Shroud. Or maybe what would be really much better is if you could just pay 2. That way it could protect itself on the turn it came in. Alright, we've got a Vodalian Mage. Costs 3. It's a 1/1. You can pay 1 and tap it to counter target spell. If the caster of target spell does not pay an additional 1 mana. It's played as an interrupt. Back when there were such a things as interrupts, it's all instants nowadays. Crazy looking Merfolk right here. Come back, cowards. Everyone knows Merfolk can't wield magic. The last words of some goblin flotilla commander. Super cool. Mark Poole, great magic artist from the old days. We've got an alternate art here. Vodalian mages were invaluable in magical combat. Unfortunately, the Homerids rated with strength, numbers, and very little magic. So, we're talking again about the Vodalian Empire being overrun by Homerids. There wasn't much they could do about it. If you go into Fallen Empires and look at the Homerid cards, they're all huge. They're not all, but compared to these puny little merfolk, they're pretty large creatures. And this guy looks a little more human. He's just really the top half of a dude with webbed fingers and a fish in the background. Vodalian mages are remarkable. Their merchants bring them arcane lore and devices from across the sea. That is an idea that will continue through most of Magic. The idea that merfolk are traders, that merfolk are the ones using the oceans to bring goods around, dive down and salvage wrecks, to carry information and goods around the world. Oh, I know this one is a badass rare. At least it was. This was one that was played as well. 2/1 for 2. Mountain walk until end of turn. A lot of people like to play red. It really helped to be able to just get in for 2. every time. This was definitely a huge lightning bolt target, I remember. Dwelling in the icy mountain streams near their goblin and orcish foes, the river merfolk were known for their stoicism. So these guys exist outside of the Bodalian Empire, it seems. They live in the rivers. I don't really know what happened to them. So that is everything from Fallen Empires. Except for this soul card right here. We know all about crewing vehicles nowadays because Kaladesh and Aether Revolt is the set that's out right now, and we tap creatures and crew vehicles. This was really an early version of that. It allowed you to tap a merfolk, and then this wall could attack. Just by being a wall, you weren't allowed to attack. That's the way the rules were written in the early days, was a creature with the type wall couldn't attack. There wasn't anything called a defender. You tap a merfolk, you give this thing +2/+1. You tap a merfolk, you let this attack. If the war machine dies, all your merfolk that are in it die. So that's a little disadvantage right there. Again, a cool card. You can see these merfolk and their war machine trying to fight off these homerids. Kind of cool. I don't know about the art. The art is a little strange. That is Fallen Empires. This is Alliances. A Benthic Explorer. Summon Merfolk. It's a 2/4 for 4. This is up to the time the biggest Merfolk we've ever seen. Everything else we've had were a 2/1, a 1/1. We had another 2/1, and 0/1. Everything was small. There wasn't anything that was bigger than 2/2. The Knight was a 2/2 for 2 blue and 1. So you can tap this thing to untap one of your opponent's lands and then get a color of mana equal to that. Distant Atlantis. Charge these explorers with the task of venturing into the unknown waters to track the despised viscerids. So this is now our merfolk up north sending out people to make sure that these underwater threats don't get to Atlantis, don't threaten Atlantis. This is an alternate artwork. Very cool artwork. I like this artwork. The rising oceans brought new lakes and new terrors. The two terrorists, I don't know how to say that, terresserie. The explorers found their ancient enemies spawning everywhere. Ancient enemies, yes indeed. Yes indeed. What happened was Empress Galena says, hey, what's this merfolk's name? I think I wrote his name down here. Akarun, open this portal. We want everybody that lived through this Homerid war to escape through this portal, and you're going to transport us to Atlantis, and we're going to make our home there because Atlantis is free from attacks from these Homerids. Well, there was a little miscalculation, and the portal opened up. It did open up to Atlantis, but 3,000 years in the future. And the bulk of the Bodalian Empire went through that portal and ended up in the future 3,000 years. And I believe we will revisit that in another episode once we get to those expansions where they bring that idea into it. What ended up happening, though, is when they first went through the portal, these merfolk were there, and they said, oh, we really don't like you. And Empress Galena said, too bad. And there was a merfolk versus merfolk war, and what happened was they won. Atlantis was renamed New Vodalia, Now we don't have to worry about this other weird thing from Greek history. No, this isn't Atlantis anymore. It's New Vidalia. Moving on again, we are now arriving in Mirage. Mirage was where Wizards started to really take a closer look at some of the inconsistencies in Magic. They tried to make everything more uniform. They tried to formalize more of the rules and the way that the cards were printed, the way that the cards looked. So you'll see that definitely here. We've got our first card here is a Coral Fighter. Cool artwork for sure. To summon Merfolk, though we still have summon. We haven't yet printed creature on here. It's a summon Merfolk. It's a 1/1. If Coral Fighter attacks and is not blocked, look at the top card of defending player's library. You can put that card on the bottom. This is sort of what we call Fate Seal now. It allowed you to continuously look at the top of their library as long as they didn't want to block this thing. Here's the Merfolk Raiders. Same artist. You'll find that certain cards, such as, we're going to have a bunch of Merfolk, let's say, they tried to have one artist, or even if it was multiple artists, tried to have a more unified theme. If you look at some of those Merfolk from Fallen Empires, there wasn't really a unified theme. One Merfolk looked like he was a human with, a fishtail. One looked like a gigantic fish with head and arms coming out. One might look just like humanoid, but with fish features. So they definitely tried to change that around here. We've got a 2/3 for 2. Hey, that's great, but it has phasing. A 2/3 with Island Walk for 2, it's not too bad, but every upkeep you have to take this thing out of play for a whole turn, and then it phases back in your next upkeep. So turn your back for a second and they just vanish, as if they weren't shifty enough. Merfolk are shifty. Merfolk Seer. It's a 2/2 for 3, and you can draw a card for a blue and 1, but you use this ability only when Merfolk Seer is put into the graveyard from play, and only once. Not really that great. I would like to see... It would have been good if it was maybe a 2/2 for 2, and you just drew a card when it left play. It just replaces itself. That wouldn't be too bad. The sea leaves no room for tears. Okay, I guess that means don't cry when your Merfolk die. And finally we have Sea Scryer. Summon Merfolk. It's a 1/1 for 2, and you can tap it to add a colorless mana, or for a colorless mana, you can filter that into a blue. Not bad. I like the idea of a Merfolk that taps for mana. 2, I think, is 1 too expensive. If this cost a blue and 1, that would be pretty interesting. I like the art too. Not the same artist, but so that was Mirage. There was a couple of Merfolk in Weatherlight. The Vodalian Illusionist. So now we're going back to the idea of the Empire, the Vodalian Empire. So there's still some of these guys around, obviously. Torin Gore, these shifty fishtails. You can't even get close to one. So this was a member. This quote is attributed to a member of the Weatherlight. Mirage Vision's Weatherlight block brought the Weatherlight and its crew into the storyline, and this really was Magic's first great arc, let's say, storyline arc that went for blocks upon blocks upon blocks before being resolved. The Merfolk Traders, a 1/2 for 2. When Merfolk Traders comes into play, draw a card, then choose and discard a card. As much as I hate water, I do love fish. Again, Miri, she's a crew of the Weatherlight. Merfolk Traders, interestingly enough, was good enough to see play. I will talk about different Merfolk decks that have come into the higher level of professional play. I'm pretty sure Merfolk Traders was in one of the first Merfolk decks to ever do well at the professional level. And that was it. Not much lore regarding the Merfolk. The storyline of Mirage Visions and Weatherlight was there was a war. There's, I think, 3 different factions that are fighting each other. There's a guy named Teferi. He's got an island. Maybe there's Merfolk around it. Maybe there's not. I don't know. He's the guy that's phasing things in and phasing things out. I think eventually he phases a whole continent out for a long time. And that is the end of the first episode here. We went alpha through Mirage on this one. Next time we're going to do Tempest through Mercadian Masks. Well, if you have any comments or concerns, if I missed a card, if there was a deck that you wanted to talk about that you used to play back in the day or used some of these cards or whatnot, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.